Hello, this is Love, also known as the Self-Love Guru, and I am your confidence coach. And what have we been talking about this week? So many different topics: how to trust yourself, confidence and assertiveness. I did a blog on hypervigilance, which you can see the definition for that term in the blog. I broke some things down, and then I also did a blog on how to trust yourself. And I talked about so much this week that I'm like, let me pull up my calendar and see what I actually covered. But today we're going to talk about mindfulness, specifically knowing your triggers. Specifically knowing your triggers. And the reason why this video is so important, ladies, is because sometimes the man is not the problem. I know people have like this saying that women have a reputation for not taking responsibility for their actions or hearing what they want to hear, doing what they want to do in spite of what our partner says. But that doesn't have to be the case. Like, you don't have to be that woman that doesn't know how to apologize when she's wrong. You don't have to be that woman that feels like there's always going to be a problem with a man and be seeking out things to be wrong. And we've all been there, let's be honest, because we're conditioned to be that way, right? And I would even argue it's gotten to the point where some men don't even know what they want in a partner because it's never really taught to want something from a woman. It's just simply, okay, I just want a wife. Well, what do you want a wife for? What kind of attributes are you looking for in this woman, right? Because now dating is very different. It's not pre-organized for you. Most of the time, our families have nothing to do with the process. I don't know about how you all grew up, but for myself, when I got my first boyfriend and when I started dating, my father felt like she doesn't need to talk about that. She doesn't need to know about any of that stuff. And that was their way of protecting me. Literally, to this day, if I tell my uncle, like, okay, I want you to, like, help me find a husband, why are you in such a rush? Why do you want to do that? And I'm like, are y'all free? I'm not 14. I'm not 14. So help me, right? But I digress. Know your triggers. So we're going to talk about some basic triggers that people typically have. And so this, I'm going to go ahead and put a trigger warning out there. If you have experienced any type of sexual assault, any type of domestic violence, and that is still like a sensitive topic for you, please go ahead and cut the video off. Because I'm going to cover 3 different areas, okay? So I really want you ladies to be mindful of this. So I hope anybody who has experienced that has exited the building. And so we're going to get started. So number 1, domestic violence. One of the things I noticed about myself is that I was always like looking for a guy to be violent towards me because I've always had a perception that like men were mean or that men were volatile. And like, yes, that is an aspect that a man should have because men are protective. But when it comes to like always perceiving a man to be that way or do that to you, you really start to draw it into you. And so to give you ladies a real life example of that, I've been assaulted 2 times in public by 2 different men who were complete strangers. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh yeah, I just drew that into myself, like I was asking for it, right? But when you perceive men a certain way, it like brings that into your reality. So the first instance, I was on a rideshare platform. I used to be a Lyft driver, and I did that when I graduated from college just to make some part-time income. But then I found out like with Uber and Lyft, you can really make a lot of money. And so I started doing this service, and at the time, of course, I wasn't paying any bills. I was dating my ex. We lived together. So I'm on this platform, and there's this guy who I accidentally like came into his yard because the person who I was picking up just let the pin drop on their location. So if you know anything about iPhones, you can allow the pin to drop on your location, which uses the location on your phone to give like an estimate. But the woman was actually across the street at an apartment complex. She was not in this person's yard. She did not live there. And so when I was communicating with this person, like, hey, you know, I'm outside. Is this your father? You know, who's approaching my car? And this guy was so belligerent. He's like, oh, well, what are you here for? I'm like, I'm picking someone up. And he said, not over here, you aren't. And like, he started hitting my car. He stuck his hand in my window, tried to grab me. And I literally had to pepper spray this man and get away. Now, plot twist to the story. I finally find my passenger. I pick her up. I'm all frantic and like, I don't know what the heck that was. I got on the phone with my man. I'm like telling him what's going on. And the person that I picked up was like, who is that? I'm like, I thought that was your dad or something. You know, that was like super weird. But we found each other. So he calls the police because he just got pepper sprayed. And when he contacted the authorities, he actually called his cousin, who was a sheriff, and he was white, just to put it out there. So I was charged with simple assault, and I don't regret it because I would rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6 any day, and I'm very unapologetic about self-defense. However, I did have to hire an attorney. I spent about $850, not including gas and like, you know, just having to leave my obligations to show up to court. But that's what it was. So I beat the case. Woo woo, but he was not trying to drop those charges. He was very adamant about me being wrong because I was in his yard. Super weird, right? 2016. Fast forward to 2019. I'm getting prepared for a conference. And so I went into this Subway, and I remember one of my friends from Meredith worked there like years ago. This was in Raleigh. I was actually at the Subway off of Wade Avenue. And if you all know anything about Raleigh, it's owned by this Arab family. And, you know, I've always gotten food from there. And so I went in there to talk with them about in-kind donations for my conference. And so I was actually told by one of my mentors that like, okay, instead of paying for food, you know, you can look for in-kind donations. So these are some places that you can go to get that done. So I went there. I'm like, hey, I just like to speak with the owner. I want to get some donations, you know, for the conference and da-da-da-da-da. I showed them the flyer. And this guy was like, yeah, we don't give out free food. Like said it like I was in there begging for a sandwich or something. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want free food. I'm really looking for some in-kind donations. And, you know, I explained it again. And I'm like, well, where is the owner? And he said, the owner isn't here. And I said, okay, well, can you give me his name? And he said, John. I'm like, what's John's last name? And he wouldn't tell me his last name. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. I'll just look it up. And I pulled out my phone. And he started going berserk, like came across the little counter, got all in my face. And I'm like, bro, I'm about to record you. So I swiped to my camera. And then the next thing I know, this guy's grabbing my phone and his wife is grabbing my keys. They locked me in the store. Like it was horrible, right? So very traumatic experience with another man that I don't even know, right? So none of that I realized was by accident. And as I started doing the real shadow work on myself to figure out like, why do you feel this way? Why are you attracting these violent men? Why are these experiences repeating themselves? And it was because I hadn't let it go. I hadn't healed through it. I hadn't released it, right? I was still just harboring those same emotions. So that's number one. I know that story was like, love, what the heck? But yeah, I've been through a few things. And so that's why I know so much, babe. I learned from my experiences as well as other people's. The second thing, sexual assault. So if you have ever been a victim of sexual assault, sometimes when you are having sex with your boyfriend or when they're asking for sex, it can remind you of some of those scenarios. And you have to really be mindful that, like, your man and this individual are not the same. Now, if you meet a new guy and he's sort of giving you those vibes like that make you uncomfortable, okay, maybe you're feeling that way because he has some of those attributes, and that may not be someone that you need to be with. But you do have to be transparent. And I know I'm always like, look, you don't have to tell men that you don't know about your traumas, and that's very true and very real. However, when you're in a committed relationship or a marriage, those are things that your man would need to know, because there may be some instances where you feel like, I really don't want to have sex right now, and it's not because I don't care about you or I don't care about you being pleased. I'm just not able to do it. And you may find yourself crying during sex. You may find sex not pleasurable. But I will say this, there is hope, and there are always different centers that you can go to for sexual assault. You can go to, some people like to go to hypnotists to help them sort of forget about that incident and those experiences so they can move forward, because that kind of stuff messes you up. It really does. But that doesn't mean that you cannot have sexual relationships that are healthy and meaningful and that are pleasurable for both you and your partner. All right. So the third thing I'm going to mention in terms of being triggered is control. Men who are control. And I always talk about this buzzword of narcissist. That's narcissism. Narcissistic personality disorder is a very real thing, okay? And when people have narcissistic personality disorder, these are not things that they are doing on purpose or anything like that. So to label a guy who is young, ignorant, maybe doing stupid things, engaging in risky behaviors like having sex with you and your best friend and your cousin and your sister, God forbid, like, you can't label him a narcissist if he has not been formally diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. So I just want to go ahead and put that out there, right? Even if he's a, seemingly controlling person, the only time a person can control you is if you're allowing that, right? So to call a person controlling, it's like, okay, yeah, they may have some controlling behaviors, but how are you responding to it, right? And just because a man has a vested interest in your future or in your well-being, that doesn't make him controlling, okay? So a person who shares their opinion about something that you do, or a person who's like, hey, I don't think you should hang out with those people, that's not a controlling aspect. They're sharing an opinion with you. They're telling you, like, I foresee this being a problem. Hopefully they explain why as well, and they will be able to articulate why they feel that way. But sometimes you can label something as like, oh, this person's trying to be controlling, and it's not really that. But when you have dealt with situations like that before, it can be very difficult to know the difference. So you have to know your triggers. And I mentioned those three because those are like the top three that women typically complain about. But I remember making a video not too long ago where I was talking about how some women will call a man controlling because he states his opinion about something and because he's paying for everything. Or they'll say, oh, well, a guy who pays for everything is because he wants to control you. And some men were just raised as providers and they take pride in you and want to make sure that you're taken care of. And that has nothing to do with wanting to control you, right? So just be mindful of that. Our past experience can really cause our minds to play tricks on us. And if you're not careful, you will start to either perpetuate those cycles or cause harm to people who mean you well. And then there's a third aspect to that with women who just opt to not date at all. We see this all the time. Oh, I've been hurt by men. Oh, I got raped when I was 15, so now I don't want to date men anymore. And it's like, don't do that to yourself. what that person did to you and what they took from you was terrible, and it's hurtful, and it can be scarring, but heal through that so you can still have a fulfilling life, because you deserve happiness. You deserve to be in a healthy relationship. You deserve to have a sexually fulfilling relationship. You deserve to be with a man who genuinely cares about you and your well-being, without feeling like this person's trying to control you or demean you as a person, like you don't have a conscious mind with intelligence, right? You deserve to not feel that way, but you have to do the work. So with that being said, I love you so much. Please check the description box for information on how to book with me, and also get my book, The Law of Attraction, the guidebook. It is so good, so informational, and I promise you it's going to explain every detail of the law of attraction and how it works, because I guarantee you, once I started to change my mindset and my perception on men as a whole, everything changed. I do notice the scumbags, but they're not preventing me from having healthy relationships, right? Because I knew I deserve more. I deserve to be happy. So this is not coming from a person who hasn't had any real life experiences, or a person who feels like you should just forget about all that stuff that happened to you and move forward, because I know it's deeper than that. And I know that if you don't handle that stuff, it can come up later. So anything you need in that description box, including my contact information, and I will see you in my next video. Peace.